The moment Mr. Alden flipped through those papers and his face went white, I knew everything had changed. His eyes moved from the ownership documents to my face, then back to Caleb, who was still grinning like he owned the world. That grin was about to cost him everything. But let me back up. I need you to understand who I am first, because this story isn't about winning. It's about what happens when you finally stop running from the truth that's been following you your whole life. My name is Randall Keaton. I'm 63 years old, and I've spent my life learning one simple lesson. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. Or lose. And sometimes, you lose it in the most unexpected ways, even to the people you love most. I grew up in rural Indiana with nothing. My father was a janitor, my mother a seamstress. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and I remember swearing to myself at 14 years old, standing in our tiny kitchen, watching my mother repair someone else's wedding dress for $5, that I would build something. Something that lasted. Something real. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. For 37 years, I ran a construction supply business. Not some massive corporation, but something I built with my own two hands and my word. Every contractor in the Tri-County area knew my name. Knew I was fair. Knew I treated my people right. I'd worked my entire adult life believing that if you're honest, if you work hard, and if you respect others, that same respect comes back to you. Then I sold my business. Not because I was broke. Not because I failed. I sold it because I was retiring, and I wanted to invest in something I could actually enjoy. Something that gave me options. One of those options was buying a controlling stake in a luxury car dealership. The owner wanted out. I wanted in. The papers were signed quietly, professionally. No fanfare. No announcements. Just me, the owner, and the knowledge of what was about to happen. And that's when I decided to visit my son-in-law. See, Caleb Dorn had been mocking me for years. Little jokes about my old truck, my work boots, my flannel shirts. Jabs disguised as concern. Comments designed to make me feel small. I'd let it slide because I loved my daughter. Because I told myself that being the bigger person meant staying silent. But that day at the dealership, everything was about to come to the surface. Everything I'd swallowed. Everything I'd forgiven. Everything he thought he could get away with because he assumed I was just a simple old man with simple means and simple understanding. What he didn't understand was that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. And as I walked into that showroom wearing my work jeans and my beat-up flannel, I had a decision to make. Let him humiliate me one more time, or show him exactly who I'd become. What happened next would change everything. For him, for my daughter, and for what I thought it meant to stand up for yourself. What do you think Randall should have done differently in his marriage with his family? And more importantly, have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. I need you to understand something about my daughter before I tell you what happened next. Lydia was perfect. I'm not just saying that because she's my child. She was genuinely perfect, bright, ambitious, warm-hearted, and kind to a fault. She had her mother's smile and her father's work ethic. Everything she touched, she made better. Then she met Caleb Dorn. I remember the day she brought him home. It was a Sunday in spring, and I was grilling steaks in the backyard. He rolled up in a silver luxury sedan, stepping out like he was walking onto a red carpet. Tailored shirt, expensive watch, shoes that probably cost more than my first truck payment. He shook my hand firmly, looked me right in the eye, and called me, "Sir," like it meant something. Lydia had that look on her face. The one daughters get when they think they've found the one. I recognized it because I'd seen my wife wear it once. Caleb was charming. There's no denying that. He laughed at my jokes. He complimented my cooking. He asked about my business like he genuinely cared. He brought wine, good wine, expensive wine, and made conversation with both of us like he'd known us for years. I told myself I was being paranoid when I caught certain moments. The way his eyes would shift when he talked about money. The way he mentioned his salary without me asking. The way he looked at my house like it was something he'd outgrown. But Lydia was happy. And when your daughter's happy, you want to believe in the man making her that way. They dated for 2 years. During that time, I started noticing things I probably should have paid attention to sooner. Small things. Caleb would make jokes about my truck being ancient. He'd suggest I upgrade my phone to something modern. When I wore my work boots to a family dinner, he'd smile and say, "Still the working man, huh, Randall?" Like it was something quaint. Something beneath him but charming in its simplicity. Lydia would laugh when he said those things. She'd say, "Dad, he's just joking." And I'd nod and smile because what else could I do? When they got engaged, I was genuinely happy for them. I paid for the wedding. I walked her down the aisle. I gave a speech about respecting the woman you marry and treating marriage like a business partnership, with honesty, fairness, and commitment. Caleb smiled through the whole thing, and I could see him glancing at his expensive watch like he was calculating something. 6 months into the marriage, my truck started acting up. Just little things at first. The steering column got loose. Rust appeared in spots I hadn't noticed before. It was time to think about a new vehicle. That's when everything shifted. Lydia called me one afternoon and said, "Dad, Caleb thinks you should let him help you find something nicer. He's great with cars. He can get you an amazing deal." I could hear the hope in her voice, like she was trying to give me a gift. Like my old truck embarrassed her somehow. I told her I'd think about it. But something in my chest tightened. A warning signal I should have listened to years earlier. Have you ever noticed when someone changes after they marry into your family? When they start making you feel small instead of welcome? Tell me in the comments below. This is where the real tension begins, and I need to know what you're thinking. The small jabs started becoming daily occurrences after that phone call. It was like Caleb had gotten permission to say what he'd been thinking all along. Every time I visited their house, there'd be some comment about my appearance or my choices. He'd look at my boots and ask if I was coming straight from the construction site. He'd glance at my old flip phone and shake his head like it was prehistoric. During dinner, he'd talk about his new clients, wealthy people, important people, and would always add something like, "You probably don't run into many of those in the supply business, right, Randall?" I'd laugh it off. I always did. But inside, something was building. A pressure. A resentment I didn't want to feel. The worst part was how Lydia reacted. At first, she'd defend me gently, saying things like, "Dad doesn't care about those things, honey." But over time, I noticed her tone changing. She started agreeing with him. She'd say things like, "Dad, maybe it's time you updated your style a little." Or, "Why do you always wear those old jeans?" Like my comfort and my choices were somehow failing her. One Saturday, we all went to dinner at a nice restaurant. I wore my usual clean jeans, a button-up shirt, my work boots polished as best I could get them. Caleb walked in wearing a 3-piece suit and immediately made a comment loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Well, someone came dressed for a different kind of evening." He laughed like it was hilarious. A couple at the next table smirked. I felt my face burn. Not from embarrassment, but from anger. Real anger. Lydia squeezed my arm and whispered, "Dad, he's just joking around." But I could see it in her eyes. She was embarrassed too. Not of me. Of herself for letting him embarrass me. The comments got bolder. He'd ask if I wanted to upgrade my vehicle, or maybe consider a different line of work. He'd bring up money constantly, how much things cost, what he'd paid for his watch, his car, his vacation. Numbers designed to make me feel like I wasn't keeping up, like I was falling behind. What he didn't know was that I was actually doing fine financially. Better than fine. But I'd never been the type to brag or flash my wealth. My father had taught me that real money doesn't advertise itself. Real money speaks quietly, if it speaks at all. But Lydia didn't know that either. As far as she was concerned, her father was just a simple construction guy who'd done okay for himself. Comfortable, maybe. But nothing like what Caleb had achieved. When she told me she was pregnant, I expected things to change. I thought maybe becoming a father would humble Caleb. Maybe he'd realize there were things more important than watches and cars and proving he was better than the people around him. I was wrong. If anything, fatherhood inflated him. He started talking about sending the baby to private schools, buying a bigger house in the right neighborhood, raising a child who understood real success. He'd look at my life like it was a cautionary tale, and I was about to let him keep doing it. What would you do if someone you loved started treating your parent like they were less than? Would you speak up or stay silent like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. The truck finally gave up on a cold Tuesday morning in November. I turned the key and heard that sound, the one where the engine kind of coughs and wheezes like it's about to die. I tried again. Same thing. On the third attempt, it actually started, but the steering column felt loose. Wrong. Like the whole thing was held together by prayers and duct tape. I sat there in my driveway for a long time, just staring at the dashboard. This truck had been with me for over 20 years. I'd hauled materials with it. I'd picked Lydia up from school in it. I'd lived part of my life in this vehicle. The rust on the doors was like scars from battle. The dents told stories. But it was time. I knew it. The truck knew it. Even my body knew it. That afternoon, Lydia called. "Dad, my car needs service. Can I borrow your truck?" When I told her about the steering column, she didn't hesitate. "Caleb said you really need to upgrade. He can get you an amazing deal at his dealership. One of their luxury models just came in. You deserve something nice, Dad." I heard it clearly that time. The tone had shifted. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was almost an intervention. Like my old truck was an embarrassment they needed to fix. I told her I'd think about it. But I was tired of thinking. I was tired of letting this man dictate how I felt about myself. I was tired of swallowing my pride while he served it to me on a plate, cut up into little pieces. So I called Caleb. "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a new vehicle. Maybe I should come by the dealership and see what you've got." His voice changed immediately. Like I just opened a door he'd been waiting at for years. "Really? Oh man, that's great, Randall. I'd love to help you out. Come by Friday. I'll make sure to roll out the red carpet for you, sir." Red carpet. Those words stuck with me. Friday morning, I woke up and looked in the mirror. 63 years old. Still strong. Still sharp. Still the same man who'd built something from nothing. And I was about to walk into that dealership wearing my jeans and my flannel shirt and my work boots, knowing exactly what was coming. Caleb was going to humiliate me. He was going to do it in front of his co-workers. He was going to make it seem like a joke, like he was just having fun with his father-in-law. And maybe, if I'd still been the man I was a year ago, I would have left. I would have let him win. But something had changed. I'd sold my business. I'd invested. I'd been paying attention. And I was about to teach this man a lesson about who he was really dealing with. Do you think Randall should have confronted Caleb earlier? Or was this the only way he could make him understand? Comment your thoughts and don't miss what happens next. I arrived at the dealership at 11 o'clock in the morning. The place was exactly what I expected. All polished floors and the smell of expensive cologne mixed with new leather. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Rows of pristine vehicles that probably cost more than most people's houses. The whole place was designed to make you feel small. Young salesmen in pressed suits circled the lot like sharks. They looked hungry. They looked like Caleb. And there he was, leaning against a silver luxury SUV like he owned the whole building, grinning. That same grin he'd been wearing at family dinners for years. The one that said he knew something I didn't. "Well, look who finally decided to trade in the dinosaur," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. A few salesmen chuckled. A couple of customers glanced over. I just smiled faintly. "Just here to look around, Caleb." "Oh, come on, sir," he said, and I caught the mockery in his voice. That tone he always used. Condescending. Performative. "You sure you can afford to look in here? These aren't farm trucks." More laughter. I could feel my ears burning, but I kept my expression calm. This was what I'd come for. Not to buy a car. To see exactly what kind of man my daughter had married. He strutted around the showroom like he was walking a runway, showing me vehicles that cost more than my old house, making sly comments the whole time. "Maybe something pre-loved would suit you better. We have some budget-friendly options in the back. You'd probably be more comfortable with something simpler." Each comment was designed to sting. Each one was meant to remind me that I was out of my league, out of my element, out of my depth. At one point, he literally patted my back and said, "Tell you what, I can probably get you approved for financing. We have some programs specifically for, customers with more modest means." That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't about helping my daughter's father get a good deal. This was about Caleb proving something to himself. About him establishing dominance. About him making sure I understood that he'd won. He'd married into my family, and now he was the one with the power. I nodded anyway. "Sounds fine. Let's see what you've got." He led me to his desk in the corner of the showroom. Lots of glass walls so everyone could see us. Lots of exposure. Perfect for his little performance. That's when I noticed Mr. Alden walking in from the back office. Tall man, probably in his 60s. I recognized him immediately because we'd spent several hours together over the past few months. He and I had a lot in common. We believed in quiet power. We understood that sometimes the most important deals were made behind closed doors, away from all the noise and posturing. He nodded at me. Just a slight dip of the head. But there was a knowing glint in his eye, like he was in on something. Caleb didn't notice. He was too busy pulling out documents, too busy setting up his big moment. "So, let's see what kind of budget-friendly options we can find for you, sir," he said, starting to spread papers across his desk. That's when Mr. Alden called out, "Caleb, are those the new contracts you're finalizing?" "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "Just getting the paperwork ready for a client." "Let me take a look." Mr. Alden reached over and took the stack. He started flipping through them casually at first, then slower. Then his whole face changed. His eyes went from the papers to me, then back to Caleb. "Caleb," he said slowly, "do you know whose name is on every one of these ownership documents?" The color drained from Caleb's face before he even heard the answer. What do you think happened in that moment? Did Caleb finally understand? Tell me in the comments and make sure you're subscribed because the next chapter is where everything explodes. Most people think revenge has to be loud. They imagine screaming matches and dramatic confrontations. They think power has to announce itself. But that's not how real power works. Real power is quiet. Real power is patient. Real power is knowing something nobody else does and waiting for exactly the right moment to let the truth out. I'd known that truth for months. After I sold my construction supply business, I wasn't just sitting around playing golf. I was thinking, investing, planning. I'd built something substantial over 37 years, and when the buyer's check cleared, I had options. Real options. Most people with money try to throw it around immediately. They buy boats. They take vacations. They try to impress people with what they have. I did something different. I invested carefully. I researched. I looked for opportunities in my community where I could make a move that meant something. That's when I noticed the dealership. Caleb's dealership. The owner, Mr. Alden, had mentioned during some community conversations that he was getting tired. He wanted to sell a controlling stake, but didn't want just any investor. He wanted someone who understood business values. Someone who understood treating people right. I set up a private meeting with him. We met at a coffee shop 15 miles outside of town. Nobody knew we were there. Nobody except us. I told him about my background. About how I'd built my business on fairness and respect. About how I believed good management came from treating people like humans, not resources. He listened carefully. Then he told me about Caleb. How talented the kid was at sales, but how his attitude was poisoning the workplace. How customers complained about feeling belittled. How other salesmen were copying his behavior. How the whole culture of the dealership was getting toxic. Mr. Alden said something that stuck with me. I built this place to give people good service. Somewhere along the way, we started measuring success by how small we could make customers feel. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, we had a deal. I would become the majority shareholder. Mr. Alden would stay on as operations manager for the transition period. And we would make staffing changes. Real changes. The paperwork took weeks. Lawyers. Accountants. Documents signed in offices Caleb would never see. I kept it completely separate from my personal life. I didn't tell Lydia. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was planning some elaborate revenge scheme, but because I wasn't sure how this would play out. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But I kept showing up at family dinners. Kept listening to Caleb make his jokes. Kept watching my daughter's face shift between pride in her husband and embarrassment for her father. And I kept quiet. When my truck started having problems, I saw an opportunity. Not to humiliate him, but to see him. Really see who he was when he thought he had the upper hand. So I called him and asked to come to the dealership. That Friday morning, walking across that parking lot in my work boots and my flannel shirt, I wasn't nervous. I was clear. The papers were signed. The money had changed hands. The ownership documents were sitting on Mr. Alden's desk in the back office. Everything was about to change. How many times have you waited for the perfect moment to show someone the truth about themselves? Have you ever let silence be your weapon instead of words? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Caleb laughed nervously. What do you mean, sir? Mr. Alden didn't smile. He just turned the page around and slid it across the desk so Caleb could see it clearly. These aren't our dealership papers anymore, he said quietly. Randall Keaton is now the majority owner. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that feels like falling. Caleb's grin evaporated instantly. His lips parted. His eyes went wide. He looked at the paper. Then at me. Then back at the paper. Then at Mr. Alden. Then back at me again. What? He stammered. I smiled. Just a small one. You were saying something about budget-friendly options, son? Other salesmen pretended not to notice, but I caught their glances. One of them actually stifled a laugh. The whole floor had gone quiet. Not obviously, just a subtle shift in the energy. Like everyone suddenly realized something had changed. Caleb looked like the ground had opened up beneath him. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. His hands were shaking. I leaned forward slowly. You see, Caleb, I came here today not to buy a car. I came to see what kind of man my daughter married. Now I know. Mr. Alden and I exchanged a glance. Just a look. But it said everything. I think we're going to need to make some staffing changes around here, I said to Mr. Alden, speaking quietly but making sure Caleb could hear every word. Then I stood up. I looked at Caleb one more time. He was frozen, trying to process what had just happened. His jaw was moving slightly, like he was trying to form words but couldn't. I turned and walked out of that dealership without looking back. I didn't need to see his face anymore. I'd seen enough. What surprised me was how empty the victory felt. I thought I'd feel vindicated, powerful, justified. Instead, I just felt tired. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for months and had finally let it out. I drove to my office. I had real work to do. There was a dealership to run now, a business to transform, a culture to rebuild. That wasn't about revenge. That was about making things right. But Caleb didn't know any of that. Caleb was sitting at his desk, staring at those papers, probably wondering how his entire life had just imploded. If you discovered someone you trusted was sabotaging your confidence the whole time, would you confront them or let karma do the work? Tell me your thoughts. Subscribe now and turn on those notifications. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Lydia. Her voice was shaking when I answered. Dad. Caleb came home furious. He said you bought the dealership? Is that true? I took a breath. Yes, honey. It's true. Why? Why would you do that? He said you embarrassed him in front of everyone. I could hear her crying on the other end. Part of me wanted to be angry at her, but I wasn't. She was caught between her father and her husband. That was a terrible place to be. Can I tell you what I saw today? I asked quietly. There was a pause. Okay. I saw a man who thinks respect is about having power over people, who thinks worth is measured in how many people he can make feel small, who's been doing that to me for years, and you've watched it happen and started believing that maybe he was right, that maybe there was something wrong with me. Dad, that's not. Let me finish, I said gently. I'm not angry with you. I'm sad for you. Because you're a good person, and you've been raising a child inside a situation where the man she's supposed to respect most treats her father like he's nothing. The line went quiet except for her breathing. I didn't buy that dealership to ruin Caleb, I continued. I did it because I knew the only way he'd ever understand the consequence of his choices was to experience them himself. I did it because I love you, and I needed you to see the truth about who you married. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. That's up to you, sweetheart. But you're not alone. You never were. A week later, she showed up at my house with a suitcase in one hand and my grandchild on her hip. She didn't say much. She just came inside and sat down. I didn't ask questions. I just held my grandchild and let her cry. Have you ever had to let someone you love discover the hard truth on their own? Have you stood silently while they made choices you knew would hurt them? Comment below. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories that prove family loyalty doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Lydia stayed with me for 3 weeks before she was ready to talk about it. We fell into a rhythm. She'd wake up, feed the baby, go to work. I'd watch the little one during the day. We'd have dinner together and sit on the porch watching the sun go down. We didn't talk about Caleb. We talked about her. About what she wanted. About who she was outside of being someone's wife. That's when I realized I'd lost her somewhere along the way. Not to Caleb, but to the idea that loving someone meant shrinking yourself. Meanwhile, Caleb was fired. Officially, it was due to unprofessional conduct. Unofficially, everyone in town knew what had happened. Word travels fast in small communities. Before he could even find another job, people had already decided he wasn't the kind of person they wanted to do business with. He tried to blame me. He told anyone who would listen that I'd set him up. That I'd humiliated him out of spite. That his father-in-law was a vindictive old man using his money to punish him. Nobody believed him. I ran the dealership differently. I changed the culture from the ground up. We paid fair commissions based on customer satisfaction, not pressure tactics. We treated every customer with genuine respect, regardless of what they could afford. We made it a place where people wanted to work because they felt valued. Sales went up. Customer satisfaction went up. Employee retention went up. It turned out that when you treat people right, everything works better. Imagine that. Lydia watched all of this happen. She saw her father transform a broken system into something that actually mattered. And slowly, she started rebuilding her relationship with me. She told me things she'd never said before. How Caleb had made her question herself. How he'd isolated her from friends and family. How he'd convinced her that the problem was with everyone else, not with him. How his charm had hidden something darker underneath. "I should have listened to you," she said one evening. "No," I told her. "You should have listened to yourself. You knew something was wrong. You felt it. You just didn't want to admit that you'd made a mistake by choosing him." That's the hardest thing about growing up, admitting when you're wrong. Especially to the people who love you most. Have you ever supported someone through choosing the wrong person? Have you had to watch them learn their own lessons? Share your experience in the comments and subscribe to this channel for more stories about family, dignity, and the quiet power of truth. 6 months later, I was driving my new pickup truck down the highway. Not fancy. Not expensive. Just a solid, reliable vehicle that would last me through however many years I had left. The title was in my name. Everything I'd built was still mine. Everything I'd earned was real. That's what I kept thinking about as I drove. Real. Authentic. Honest. Caleb eventually moved out of state. I heard through the grapevine that he'd found work at another dealership, probably doing the same things he'd done here. Some people don't learn. Some people just keep making the same choices, expecting different results. But that wasn't my concern anymore. What mattered was my daughter. My grandchild. The business I was building into something that actually meant something to the community. What mattered was rebuilding trust with Lydia and helping her understand that she deserved better. That we both deserved better. The dealership became something I was proud of. Not just profitable but good. A place where people felt respected. Where value wasn't measured by your net worth or your clothes or your watch. Where a person was judged by their character and their honesty. I hired people who'd been overlooked elsewhere. People who didn't fit the slick salesman mold. People who were good at heart. And they built something better than anything Caleb could have imagined. Lydia eventually moved into her own place. She started dating again, carefully this time. She learned to listen to that quiet voice inside that tells you when something isn't right. She started raising her son with the values my parents had given me. Values about hard work and humility and respect. Sometimes she'd ask me how I knew to stay calm that day at the dealership. How I didn't explode when Caleb was mocking me in front of all those people. I'd tell her the same thing my father had told me years ago. "Son, the loudest victory is the one that doesn't need to scream. See, what I've learned in my 63 years is this. Respect isn't something you demand. It's not something you force. It's something you build through consistency, through showing up, through proving day after day that you mean what you say and you do what you promise. Pride fades, clothes get old, cars rust, but character endures. Character lasts. Character is what people remember about you when everything else is gone. I could have spent the rest of my life bitter about what Caleb did. I could have let it poison me. Instead, I let it teach me. I let it show me who was strong enough to see the truth and who wasn't. And I kept moving forward. That's all any of us can really do. Thank you for listening to this story. If you've been underestimated by someone close to you, if you've watched someone you love make the wrong choice, if you've ever had to let silence speak louder than words, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. Don't keep it to yourself. There's someone out there who needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. We upload new content regularly, stories about real people, real struggles, and real victories. And remember, the most powerful thing you can do is stay true to who you are, no matter who's watching. Thank you for being part of this family.